if you ask them, do you love yourself? Do you accept yourself? And do you respect yourself? There would be a pause at the very least. and sometimes there'd be a pushback. Now, when you venture into a relationship, if you don't truly love, accept, and respect yourself, yet you expect somebody else to do it, how are they going to know how to do it if you don't know how to do it?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good day. This is Kallum and Conor with the Unplugged podcast number 69 with Colin McKay, who's joining us all the way from Edinburgh, Scotland. And Kallum will share a little bit more about you with the world, to the world.
Thanks, Conor. Colin's here with me. He is a coach, a linguistics expert known for helping leaders and high performers think clearly, communicate powerfully, and lead with precision. As a two-time author, Colin brings a deep understanding of language, meaning, and influence, showing how the words we use shape behavior, decision-making, and results. With a calm, grounded presence and a wicked sense of humor, and a sharp eye for patterns in thinking and communication, Colin supports people to cut through complexity, dissolve internal noise, and create sustainable personal and professional change. His work blends strategic insight and human depth, making him a trusted guide for navigating leadership growth and transition. Colin's approach is practical, thoughtful, and quietly transformational, focused not on hype, but on mastery, clarity, and lasting impact. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. We already have your first superfan who's messaged us. Mandy Healy wrote, "What a fabulous individual." So they're fighting over each other to watch this podcast today, Colin. Lovely to have you. Now, Cal and I were thinking we should just cut through the noise and talk about the juicy stuff. You are a linguistic expert, communication expert, and heavily involved in helping people overcome and mend and heal from relationships and create new ones. So why do relationships fail?
Communication is an art form that we've learnt, but Joe Average has not learnt. The reality that people create with their language has certainly got flaws, limitations, emotional associations that play out in their projections based on what the reality they're creating for themselves in their life. Now, when an individual lives their life with negative emotional associations and limitations, parts conflicts, that's difficult enough. But when you go into a relationship, you've got two dynamics. And if they're not clear on who they are, what their boundaries are, what the values are, what's important to them, and they're not free to understand that and communicate that, then we've got two people that are sort of shadow boxing, trying to work out how to best navigate the relationship and allow the relationship to evolve and grow.
Now, you're an NLP trainer. I'm an NLP trainer. Callum's an NLP master trainer. Most of our viewers, I think a lot of our viewers are NLP trained. But those who are not NLP trained, let's backtrack a little bit about what is a negative emotion, what is a conflict, and briefly what are values, and why are they important in relationships?
So when somebody has the beliefs around who they are and what they are, that can be horribly skewed. So ideally, somebody would know who they are and what they are. They would have we talked about this in the very first podcast that I did with you, where they would be able to love themselves, accept themselves, and respect themselves. I find that is very rare.
Hi there, this is Conor and Kallum from Connekt Coaching. Hope you are enjoying the Unplugged podcast. Nothing lights us up more than seeing businesses thrive, especially in uncertain times. We have 32 combined years of doing nothing but mentoring and training businesses from around the globe in order to increase their revenue and thrive in uncertain times. So what we would like to do is share with you a little bit about what we've discovered over the last 32 years.
We've created this amazing business model called the Forever Business Model, and we want to give it to you for free. All you need to do is jump down into the description below. There's a link there called Steal Our Forever Business Model. Click on the link. There's a 9-minute video that you can watch where we unpack everything you need to know to implement it in your business right away.
So even a well-balanced, functioning human who has a nice enough life and the life seems to deliver them all right stuff, if you ask them, do you love yourself? Do you accept yourself? And do you respect yourself? There would be a pause at the very least. And sometimes there'd be a pushback. Now, when you venture into a relationship, if you don't truly love, accept, and respect yourself, yet you expect somebody else to do it, how are they going to know how to do it if you don't know how to do it?
Because outside of you as a mirror, is that on the perceptionist projection level?
Yeah. So ultimately, it's almost like I used to always tell a story in my trainings about my granny. My granny was the first person I ever knew, genuinely ever knew, that I loved. Now, my granny was a bit of a hermit. She was morbidly obese. She was 5 foot tall and 28 stone. But I loved my granny, and I used to visit my granny, and I loved being around her, and I loved her stories, and I loved her sense of humor. She had this thing where when I was about 15, I arrived at her house, and she had something sitting on the dining room table, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. I found this, and I was going to throw it in the bucket, but I thought you might like it." And I've always thought that's what relationships function like. I'm not willing to love myself, to accept myself, or respect myself, but I want you to do it. So it's already flawed. If somebody doesn't know themselves well enough and isn't willing to love themselves, then how are they ever going to recognize when somebody else loves them? They'll tend to reject it.
How would someone not be willing to love themselves? Is that a conscious decision?
It's no, it's a deeply unconscious way of being based on negative emotional associations and limitations. So they'll have been brought up in an environment. So I wrote about it in my first book, where we have our attachment styles, and our attachment styles come from childhood. We're either have a secure attachment style. So that's a person who's grown up in an environment where love was given freely. They always felt safe, secure, loved, accepted. They were in a position where they felt a bit special because the people around them made that clear to them on a regular basis, and with no caveats or contract. Now, secure people are few and far between, and so then we fall into the next attachment style, which is an anxious attachment style. These are people who are in a position where they don't necessarily, am I loved? Am I not loved? Am I important? Am I accepted? So they're questioning it. Then we have people who are in the avoidant attachment style.
Okay.
So avoidant attachment style is people that have been hurt and been rejected in their perception, and then are scared to engage just in case that happens again. And then we get the final style, which is the disorganized attachment style, which is a bit of everything, where 1 minute it's there, 1 minute it's taken away from you. it's performative. I have to do things to feel like I get attention, to feel like people love and appreciate me, and I've got a safe space here. And so the disorganized attachment style is something that we've developed from our childhood, whatever our childhood was, with sibling rivalry, with parents that were absent, with internal fighting, with one parent playing a child off against another parent. And these attachment styles are deeply, deeply, deeply unconscious. And you probably won't be aware of them. But then they start to play out in your relationships.
Okay.
So in these different categories that you just mentioned, how do they express themselves later in life in the personal and the romantic relationships or the long-term marriages that people have? How do we see those kind of expressed both positively and negatively, I guess, in those relationships?
Well, we initially see it in the lack of communication.
Right.
So if you were doing couple counseling, you would speak to a couple, and one person would tell you with rapport how they felt, and then the other person would be unaware of it. I had it recently with a couple that I've been working with, where one chases and the other avoids. So the two of them are never going to. The more this person avoids, the more this person will chase, and the chasing in of itself will cause more avoidance. So they're in a position where they've got deeply unconscious patterns that are being played out that they don't entirely consciously understand, and it's conflicting. Yeah. Part of the reason I wrote my first book is what triggered it. I'm well aware of dysfunctional patterns, and I'm well aware of dysfunctional behavior, not only in relationships, but corporately, because I've had a lot of corporate experience, and we see very dysfunctional behavior.
Yeah. So I guess the presupposition in my mind, I don't know about you, Cal, I'm thinking like personal relationship, but
yeah, I was.
But this could play out in the workplace.
Can you imagine a working environment where you had dynamic people in leadership positions, yet their communication was deeply flawed, and it was deeply flawed because of insecurities that were being played out? I don't know if you've ever had that experience.
I've had that experience.
Have you?
I think Cal has had that experience too.
Yeah, it's very common. So there's power plays, there's people backstabbing and undermining, there's little secret cliques. People will tell you one thing to your face whilst telling somebody else something else, completely contradictory.
Yes.
And you'll only find out, you think, wait a minute, who said that? They didn't say that to me.
And then you question yourself, like, am I the
It's part of that whole gaslighting model,
right.
Which gaslighting. So personality types, I wrote about it in the first book. Psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissists are very rare, but psychopathic, sociopathic, and narcissistic behavior is not.
Where is it like when someone's, like Tad would use this as an example, when you're pregnant, you can't have pregnant tendencies, pregnant symptom, like you're pregnant or you're not pregnant.
Yeah.
You break your arm, you don't break your arm. Why? How does one say they're not a sociopath or narcissist, but they have narcissistic behavior, but they're not a narcissist?
Yeah. So that is driven mostly, in my experience, through vulnerability. So they have a vulnerability, an uncertainty. Corporately, we talk about people having imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody is suffering from that and they're hiding it, that will play out in their behavior. So they can certainly attack, but they're merely defending their own unconscious vulnerabilities, which also plays out very much in relationships. Most of the time, especially when you're dealing with nice people, they're a nice person, but they can be sometimes quite nasty, where you think, what's that all about? But it's a vulnerability, and they're going into a defensive position because of something deeply unconscious that's bothering them. I think Cal had a question, but he's frozen.
Okay, so someone who has narcissistic tendencies,
they might not
has
have
a wound unhealed underneath. Is that sort of what?
Yeah, they might not have narcissistic tendencies, but they might, in certain contexts, under certain pressure, behave in a narcissistic way.
Okay.
So there's 3 levels to it. Level number 1 is a pure narcissist. They're very rare. Level number 2 is somebody with narcissistic tendencies. They've learned that behaving in a certain way gets them an outcome and a result, and it's a bit intoxicating. They can't help themselves.
So it's almost like an ego-driven behavior that they've learned, and like, I get what I want. I get my way when I do this, and therefore I'll do more of it.
Yeah, we're human beings. Human beings, like electricity, will go the easiest route. And if we've learned behaviors that get us a result, under even if we don't like those behaviors, under stress, we may regress back to doing that behavior because it gets us a result. It's like somebody being a values level 5 regressing back to a values level 3 under pressure.
Under pressure.
Yeah. So there's lots of people will demonstrate narcissistic, sociopathic, or psychopathic behaviors, but that's not who they are. It's highly contextualized, and it's under a huge amount of internal pressure that's being created by a context.
I'm glad you made that distinction, Colin, because there does seem to be a bit of a trend for people to just be blanket labeling other people, especially in relationships, being a psychopath, a sociopath, a narcissist. They're gaslighting me. It's so prevalent at the moment. It's hard to distinguish between, wow, am I just living in a world full of psychopaths and sociopaths? Or, like you said, is it a behavioral pattern that's being exhibited in a highly contextualized situation? And understanding that there is a difference helps me to have hope, because otherwise Facebook and Twitter would be true and everyone would just be absolute psychopaths. And I feel like it's kind of been...
Most people, 97% of people are lovely.
Yeah.
They're genuinely good people. Having said that, these 97% of genuinely good people can still do behaviors in certain contexts that you think, that's not ideal. Yeah. I remember I watched...
From the result.
Well, it's like we talk about negatives. For every bad in your life, there's a good chance there's at least 20,000 goods. But people have a tendency to focus in on the bad, and the reason for that is because the bad stimulates a negative emotion, and the negative emotion is far more powerful than the innocuous positive emotion. So if I felt relaxed, or I felt good, or I felt okay, these are positives. But if I felt terrified, then terrified is going to draw way more attention because it's a significantly more powerful emotion. So the reason our society has a tendency to focus on the negatives is because of the negative emotional state that's stimulated by the negative experience. So it certainly in the moment seems way bigger than everything else. Now, within relationships, if people have unresolved emotional expectations or experiences that they then are unconsciously projecting, they're looking for them, they will find them. And of course, a negative emotion is associated to that. So thus that one action ends up being way bigger than the 25 positive actions that the person has done in this today or this week. So the person can do in relationships, you'll have experienced, no doubt, somebody saying to you, "You don't love me." You come into that conclusion. I've done this. But again, that feeds into attraction strategies, deep love strategies, all those complex things. But a lot of it is to do with what are the unconscious things that are being triggered for them that are unresolved that they're then projecting into this current experience, whether it be a relationship or a work or a friendship or a work environment. If somebody has a lot of unconscious baggage, then unfortunately their focus will be drawn towards those negatives. This is where clear, concise, honest, accurate communication is required. And we have to have sensory awareness. So we can think we're being clear, concise, honest, and accurate, but is that what's being received? So we need to have an empathy. We need to have a behavioral flexibility. We need to be able to understand what might be leaking into my language in communicating what I think is clear, concise, and what might be the flawed interpretation of what I'm saying. So both parties can be at fault in any communication. We talk about communication, you're both 100% responsible, but we can only both be 100% responsible if we're both 100% trained and we're both 100% aware and we're both 100% clear on the resolution that we've created for ourselves for the unconscious negative emotional stuff that might be being triggered within us.
Could you give an example of what this would look like in everyday? So I'm following you with the theory. How would this roll out in a everyday long-term relationship, be it married or not married, but a longer-term relationship?
Yeah, so I've often come across the mismatch with sex drives. So sexual activity. So you could have a man being demonstrative.
Okay.
And the woman thinking, "Oh, I know what you want." Yeah, where there's a mismatch where he's genuinely being affectionate, but his affection is being misinterpreted as impossibly wanting something else. And vice versa. It can become a bit of a minefield where people think, "Well, I'm not gonna snuggle up to you because you're just gonna think, and how else can I go about it?" But that's where the communication is vital. We need to understand, what do you actually feel? What's driving your behavior? And how is that being received? I talk about
intention. Is this sort of?
Well, when remember, what goes on in here transmits. whether you say it or not. Now, we're all trained to recognize what goes on here will probably cause flaws in the structure of the language they choose to use. So we are trained to be able to go, you're saying X, but that's not what's really going on because of how you've chosen to say it. But that's not always the case. And women, the sacred feminine, are way more intuitive naturally than we are as men. And women pick up on what's going on in here. So I usually in trainings, especially if I've got a lot of women in trainings, because I know this will be a true fact that they'll all have experienced, where I say, you're at a bar, you're with your friends, you're having a lovely night out, and a handsome guy comes up, starts chatting to you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what he's saying. There's nothing wrong with his demeanor. But for some reason, he makes your skin crawl. Now, that's because what's going on in here doesn't match what's coming out of here. And they pick up on it. So they're left a bit, he's a bit creepy. I want to get away from him. But I can't explain why. And it's the same for all communication.
We teach this in sales. Like, think what you want your prospect to do. Like, don't go into the sales conversation as a needy, I need this sale.
It's the same process. As Tad always said, in every interaction, someone is selling and someone is buying.
Yes.
Now, you need to decide, is this context and moment, is the most effective thing for me to do is to be selling? Or is the most effective thing for me to do right now is to be buying? Because you'll get more traction if you pick the right one in the right context. Our job is to understand, what are we being presented with? First of all, how is it impacting and affecting us? And what is it that we want to communicate, or what more would we want to understand? So that's either ask very good questions. Well, almost the solution to everything is to ask very good questions. One of the tasks I give to my executive clients at some stage in every coaching program is, at some stage I'll give them a task for 1 week. You're not allowed to answer a question. If you get asked a question, you must not answer it.
Okay.
You are allowed to ask a question, but you're not allowed to answer the question. Yeah, because most CEOs, most senior managers, executives, they've created a situation for themselves where they've trained their people to come to them for the solutions. Either because they're scared of getting it wrong, or because they think, better find out what Conor wants. Yeah. So I teach them for a week to experience what happens when you listen well. Notice 70% of the time you can't answer the question anyway because the question was too ambiguous. And from that, you'll start learning to ask better questions, which will stimulate the individual to have a flow of consciousness that will allow them to probably 7 times out of 10, answer their own question. And this dynamic exists in business, it exists in sales, it exists in relationships. People mind read way too much without even acknowledging their mind reading.
What is a mind read for people who are listening and watching who may not know what a mind read is?
Well, a mind read, the technical explanation for a mind read is when you claim to know the thoughts or feelings of another individual without any evidence to support it. I am almost fanatical in my trainings about presuppositions. Because I say to people, presuppositions are foundational for you to understand what's real and what's not. I have a wonderful client, a beautiful individual that's incredibly intelligent. She has a tendency, because of her intelligence, she has a tendency to come up with the narrative. I've thought, well, it's all very clever and that's great, but if you're going to come up with a narrative, because this was the task I gave her, come up with 3. Yeah? Test yourself. If you're going to come up with one narrative, come up with another 2, minimum. So that you teach yourself that, yeah, narrative number 1 is possible, but so is narrative number 2, and so is narrative number 3. We want to understand.
So they would create a narrative and then lock in on that and say, this is now law.
This is what's happening.
Right.
This is what I've heard. This is what I know is happening. You don't know that's happening. One is you haven't investigated in any way, shape, or form. You haven't asked any questions around it. My greatest loved statement with everybody I work with is Socrates. So Socrates, I'll caveat this, Socrates was reported to have said, we're already one step removed, Socrates was reported to have said, my genius comes from the fact that I know nothing. And that frame allowed him to listen and not mind read. I'm a very experienced person. This person's telling me a story. I know what this is. Well, no, you don't, because this is a unique person with a unique story. So how about you listen to the story fully, recognize what bits of are a bit vague, and then ask good questions. And only when you feel confident that you've fleshed out the entire detail of the story can you then decide what you think about it, or how you're going to engage with it, or what action to take around it. Yeah, the reason I caveat is because Socrates apparently never wrote anything down. Right. And we only know that statement because Plato told us that's what he said. So I almost use it as the fact that we're already one step removed. We don't even know if that's fact. Yeah. We're taking Plato's word for it that was fact. Yeah. And
so coming back to like personal relationships.
Yeah.
And if communication, if everyone was able to improve their communication, there would be less conflict in these relationships.
Ideally, there would be none.
Is every relationship salvageable? Is that the word?
Yes. Yes. The reason so I've had plenty of negative experiences, not just personally, but through coaching and observation and through all my corporate career. I've seen it in action lots of times. I've seen how ineffective and how it doesn't work. But what inspired me to write the book is I was in the middle of coaching a wonderful couple, lovely couple, a couple who clearly loved each other and respected each other, and their life was, for the most part, brilliant. Yet the communication within that dynamic, even that was flawed, where there was aspects where you just think, really? And they said that in that moment? Was that what they chose to say? And so you ended up thinking, geez, even in a really good relationship, there can be a massive flaw in the communication that can create a negative, that if left unattended can create resentment, which can fester and then damage the stability and structure of what is a powerful, positive relationship. And I realized that behavior exists in almost every relationship. Not every relationship does it impact in such a way that it starts to create resentment, but it can do. And that started me thinking, and I looked at a lot of friends and friends' relationships where I thought, geez, that's a good relationship, yet there's aspects of it that are dysfunctional. I wouldn't go as far as to say toxic, but certainly dysfunctional. And if left unattended, and if left where you didn't do anything about it, there's a chance that it could become toxic.
Yeah.
And it becomes toxic because it starts to create resentment. You know, as human beings, we're designed to look for fulfillment. We are positively driven beings. You know, it's like sales. We're looking for the benefit. Now, in most of traditional sales, which is deeply flawed and ineffective, is they look for pain points. They look for the problem, and they look to sell a solution to the problem. Well, that's not the way to sell. Yes, we'll find a pain point, but then we have to investigate a little bit further to find out the benefit. And we're going to be far more effective if we sell to the benefit. You know, we all know about purchases that are driven by pain. It's a solution-based purchase. They're usually less than exciting and motivating and fulfilling. Whereas if we find a forward-focused, benefit-based purchase, then that's going to lead to far greater value and satisfaction. The person's going to be far happier with that purchase in the long run.
So looking at, if you were to work with a couple,
Yes.
without giving away your trade secrets,
Yeah.
but if you were to work with a couple, what would the first thing, like they're like, you know, we're not seeing eye to eye, we're fighting with this, whatever the presenting problem is. Where do you start? How do you start to pull away these layers of the onion?
Well, the minute you start interacting with that couple, you'll start to see the dysfunctional patterns within their communication. So you'll start to identify the dysfunctional negative emotional associations, negative beliefs, limiting beliefs. You know, all of that will come out through presuppositions, metamorph. You'll hear it. Then we need to look deeper than that. So we need to work out, where did that begin? How long's that been there? And strangely enough, in a 20-year relationship, it could have been there from the very beginning.
Freya. Yeah.
And we're 20 years on. Easily. So we need to work out, what is the structure of that? What are you looking to achieve through it? Yeah, and how has that been working? It won't be working. So they'll have plenty of experience of the negative impact and negative effect and the ineffective results it creates, yet they'll still be repeating the same pattern. Then we have to take the couple separately and work out, well, what is your relationship history? So that takes us all the way back to the imprint period, where what was your attachment style? Where were the flaws there, and what have you carried into this relationship? And then within that, we also have to start, once we understand that, reframe that, let go of that, we also have to look at strategies and values. I'm working with a couple at the moment where there's a good chance that their values hierarchy will have some quite glaringly obvious conflicts. Yeah, within it. And a relationship is a living thing. Some people meet their partner early in life from school. Some people meet their partner later in life after other experiences and baggage. So we have to look at, well, what's the foundation of relationship? How has it evolved through this first phase? And what phase are you in now? So, Conor, I've known you for a very long time.
A few years.
And I've loved you through many phases of our relationship, but we evolve. We're different people. You and I are completely different people than we were when we first met, but our friendship has always been maintained because as we've evolved, there's been a match. We haven't evolved apart. We've evolved sort of in a parallel.
Yeah.
Where that just naturally works. Now, within relationships, people can evolve. So say they met when they were 19, now they're 42. Who they are as people may be quite different. And what they require from life to be fulfilled might be quite different. Do they have the tools? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the awareness to be able to investigate that? Probably not. So the relationship as a sort of third entity also needs to allow to evolve to fit with where they are now as a couple.
Yeah.
And for that to be effective, there has to be really good communication. But because human beings have vulnerabilities are, people avoid them.
I mean, Cal and I do work with businesses, and we look at their values and do values alignment, and it's almost exactly the same, but just in a business context. The relationship is with the business and the employees, or the business and the people in the business, or the business and the public.
Yep.
People will often spend more money if they're aligned with the values of the business.
It's the same principles. Relationships are relationships, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a business relationship, or whether it's a romantic relationship. Yeah, hopefully you only have sex in the romantic relationship, but the relationships fundamentally are the same. And there's either honesty and by the way, honesty and trust only comes through consistency. People can be notoriously bad at being consistent. And consistency is a subliminal human behavioral trait. So you can say whatever you like, but if your behavior hasn't been consistent, then whatever you say won't land. Same in business. You know, if you're a service-driven business and you say this is how we look after our customers, but then that's not necessarily the experience they have. We've all known companies that do that. Then the trust gets broken. Now, when that trust is broken, it becomes very difficult to repair.
Yeah.
It's not impossible to repair, but it is.
It just takes longer
to repair. Well, it takes an evolved awareness, empathy, caring, understanding, communication, and willingness. So are both parties willing to look at this, dismantle it, understand it, rebuild it, and repair, or not? And so relationships have phases. Whether you're in the best relationship ever in the history of the world, it will go through phases, seasons, where things are a bit tougher. Kallum, you've got a young family. That's a season. and it's a more challenging season. And it works incredibly well if the foundation is solid and people stay willing to be open and honest and communicate accurately. Then that's just a tougher time than other times, but it's not insurmountable. Just some people lack the skill to be able to understand that and to be able to maneuver through it. And some may have baggage that is so deeply unconscious they don't even know it's there, yet it's playing out and being projected into this current experience that they're having.
Colin, you talked a lot about at the start of this conversation about loving yourself, and until you learn to love yourself, until you're open to loving yourself, you can't possibly love somebody else fully because you're projecting that lack of love onto the relationship at some level.
The caveat to that, Kallum, is it's actually accepting love. That's the bit that's flawed. See, if you don't love yourself truly, then you may not recognize or accept that you are loved because it's conflicting.
This ties into a conversation I was having with another coach a few weeks ago where they were talking about the different types of reactivity of, say, the ego and the part of you that feels a lack of self-worth, which they can be kind of separated as two different entities, but they're basically part of the same part of the psyche. But the different types of ways that when you're in, ego, in not in the sort of enlightened way of the ego, but in the ego that needs validation and those sorts of things, and the self-worth that needs to be reassured, that there's different types of reactions that occur in those situations that create negative outcomes, if you will. So I'm interested to hear your take on that, and if you kind of touch on those sorts of things or think about those sorts of things in the way that people accept love, or the way that they resolve the fact that they haven't felt that in the past. Because I do feel like the ego and the self-worth can then seek those things out in unproductive ways if they're falling more into one end or into the other. Did that question make sense? It was kind of a little bit convoluted, but I hope.
Yeah. And it's a very important question, because this is where the dishonesty begins. So we have all known people, I'm predicting, and your listeners will be the same, where we've known somebody that no matter how much validation you give them, it's never enough. No matter how often you give them praise, you give them good feedback, you congratulate them on the improvements that they've made, it doesn't land. Yeah. So fundamentally, their lack of acceptance of self and love of self is flawed. So that information, although it's very clear, it's very concise, it's very accurate, that there's evidence to validate it, it doesn't get in. Yeah. Now, we also know people who we know that to be true for them, yet they're functioning from ego.
Yeah.
So we know lots and lots of people who are incredibly confident, incredibly capable. I know what I'm doing, and they'll tell you exactly what they're doing, and they'll bluster about as if they're the king of the hill. Yeah. Yet we know fundamentally there's something that they're fighting against under the surface that they can't dare acknowledge or admit. I went through it when I
used to work with someone like that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I've had that experience many times. Everything I've learned, especially around language, I've always used the knowledge that I've acquired to overlay my past experiences. So I can look back at my life and go, I can see what's happening there. Yeah. So the insights that I've gained over 20 years of doing what I've doing has allowed me to look at my past and understand what drove that. When I left Edinburgh originally to go to New Zealand, I was 33. Now, I was king in my own kingdom. Yeah. Nobody messed with Colin. But what those people didn't understand is Colin was terrified. They were frightened of Colin, but they didn't understand that Colin was actually terrified. So I got myself into a position in the role that I was a production manager where I daren't make a mistake because I felt they'll be on me like a pack of dogs. If I stumble and fall, the opportunity, so I was living a life where I was keeping an illusion driven by ego, pretending that I was top dog, nobody messes, nobody knows better than I do. Yeah. And I didn't realize how bad it was. I thought I was in survival mode, yet partially believing my own PR. So did I believe my own ego? Yeah, I did. Did I really understand that I was being driven by insecurity and fear? No. So it was only after I left and I went to New Zealand, very, very confident. But you see, I arrived in a whole new environment where I didn't have that potent power that was given to me by all people that believed I had it. And I had to start completely afresh. It was a very humbling experience. And it had its challenges. And yeah, I worked my way up and I ended up becoming an assistant manager of a photocopy print company. But I had realized that there was a vulnerability that I hadn't acknowledged when I had been in Edinburgh, when I left Edinburgh. And I got the most rude awakening. I was away for 6 years before I came back to Edinburgh. And I was excited to be back in Edinburgh as a visit. I was here for my 40th birthday. So I came back for a trip for my 40th birthday, keen to catch up with all my friends and mates because we had a really functional, fun social circle based around work colleagues. And when I arrived back, one of my key people that I wanted to catch up with, I said, oh, let's go and have lunch. And she said, yep, okay. And so we went for lunch, and before we sat down and ordered, she said to me, I've been dreading you coming back. I went, what? Why? And she went, I've built myself up into a good place, and the thought of you coming back, I didn't want you to take it all away from me. Now, I had been completely unaware of that. I did not know that this person that I cared for felt that way. So it allowed me to completely reassess who I had been and who I wanted to be. And it also was around the same time I was doing my clinical hypnotherapy training, then my NLP training, and you and I met, Conor. But that was a very pivotal part for me, and that's where I broke the ego away from the, and I was able to look at the truth. Some people are so frightened of the truth they're unable to stop and look at it.
What advice would you give to them? Because I would imagine, I'm mind reading here, but a lot of people would be afraid to truly look at themselves in the mirror.
So people won't acknowledge the what if they don't understand the how. If people can't work out the how, they will not allow the what to exist.
Like how to fix it. If I don't know how to fix it, I'm
I
not
don't
going
know
to
how
do
to fix it. I'm not going to acknowledge what it is.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Now,
That makes sense.
we talk about this in goal setting. We have to acknowledge the what first. The how will come. Yeah, but we have to understand what it is that we want in the first place. But people, there's an insecurity in having to face the what when you have no idea around the how.
That's right.
And people will avoid it.
And even if it's because of an inflated ego or a lack of self-worth, they can be terrifying to those people because it's a existential crisis on their identity, their personal identity. And I think that's kind of what you were
It diminishes their life.
Yeah, it was kind of what you summed up around when you and you didn't have that kind of same notoriety that you did in Scotland, and it kind of challenged that whole identity piece, and that's existential for some people.
What we see with classic values level 3s who don't evolve out of levels 3, they end up stuck there, but their world gets smaller because the people that they can be get smaller.
Right.
And they end up, their life becomes diminished because of it. They become trapped in it. Yeah. Our job as human beings is we're here in the physical to gather experiences. And in gathering experiences, we're meant to process the experiences we gather to feed the evolution of our mental and emotional faculties. Ultimately, if we do that well, then we can end up on a spiritual path. It's like, we all start from spirit and we descend down into the material. The problem with that descent for most people, everyone, is as we descend into the material, we get to about here and it gets a bit tough. Now, I read a lot of esoteric-based stuff. Israel Regardie talked about it, where he said, this is the point where you have to take your shit out and have a look at it. Now, to be able to do that, you need to feel safe. You need to feel supported. You need to have tools, skills. I personally believe linguistic skills to be able to look at that, understand it, process through it, and resolve it. If you do that, you get to complete the descent. And when you complete the descent, you can begin the ascent back up to spirit. So spirituality only happens after you've completed the descent. Very few people in the world today are equipped with the tools, the skills, and the knowledge to truly, effectively complete the descent. That's why we've got a society full of what's called pseudo-spirituality.
Yeah, spiritual bypass.
You'll see lots of people telling you how spiritual they are, yet they're still emotionally triggered, they're still emotionally charged. A truly spiritual person will not be fazed by anything. In cultures, we talked about the elders of the village. The elders of the village 2,000 years ago were the wise ones. Our elders of the village are not the wise ones. Our elders of the village are the frightened ones, the angry ones, the unfulfilled ones, the dissatisfied ones. And that's what's happened over the past 2,000 years. But that opens up a whole new can of worms that we could talk about for hours. But that whole process of equipping people to understand how they can complete the descent, how they can evolve mentally and emotionally so that they can free themselves up to ultimately evolve spiritually in whatever shape, flavor, or fashion they fancy. And I suppose that's what all three of us here are in the business of. We're in the business of helping people understand how to process the reality they're perceiving and how to understand it in a way that supports them. Nothing is real. We cannot perceive true reality. Our ability to understand time, space, matter, and energy in its truest form is impossible. That's why we process 134 bits out of 2 million. We delete, distort, and generalize, which is the whole basis of metamodel. Metamodel is trance. Our job with delete, distort, and generalize is to be able to recognize the trance the person's creating for themselves and how those limitations are affecting them, and find ways of drilling down on detail that will pull them out of that trance to allow them to be in a more effective trance. Now, when we get into relationships, that's two people trying to do that. It's not a surprise to understand it's twice as complicated.
More variables. You've mentioned a couple books. What are these books, Colin?
I have my first book, which is My Psychopathic Romance.
Which
you have a
I
copy
got
of it?
a copy. Which...
So this is... I have always had a thing about bullies. I don't like bullies. In relationships, people can be quite bullying without realizing that that's what they're doing. I also believe in people understanding what red flags are and to be able to pay attention to what those red flags are. I wrote the book to help people be aware of not only what they might be allowing to happen to them, but what they might be doing at times themselves. I've had a couple of very evolved people read through that book, recognize when there's certain behaviors have happened and they've allowed certain behaviors to happen, but they've also given me the feedback where they've recognized, I've done that.
Themselves, yeah.
The reason I wrote the second book, which is Healthy Lasting Love, get it on Amazon. The second book, Healthy Lasting Love, I wrote from a sales, it's purely from a commercial standpoint where it began, because after publishing the first book in the beginning of September, I think it was, the feedback I got from well-respected people that had read it and said, Col, it's brilliant. Even some of them found it confronting. So as they were reading it, they were going, geez, God. Oh. And I thought, right, from a commercial aspect, the perception may well be that it's a negative book. It's not a negative book. I think it's an incredibly positive book. I think it would help equip people to know stuff that they should really know to avoid them ending up in a coercive situation. So then I thought, well, maybe commercially I should write a book from the positive angle. So Healthy Lasting Love, I wrote and published it, only published it just a couple of weeks ago on Amazon. That was more about, well, here's narratives based on challenges that I've dealt with and coached. And it's vignette. It's not the whole issue they had in the relationship, but I picked, here's a couple, here's the problem they were faced with. This is the things they needed to understand and navigate through it. This is the end result that as they work beyond it. And I looked to cover off, there's 12 chapters that cover off 12 different types of challenge you could have in a relationship. And I look to cover those off in a way that shows you how you might want to navigate through those challenges. And
so it gives you some how.
Both books give you how. So the second half of the first book has a lot of personal evolutionary work you would want to do on yourself to understand how you're managing to draw that to you, because it comes from you in the first place. You know, and most people, you all have known people who have cyclical relationships where they have half a dozen relationships and each relationship ends up the same way. And you think, well, that's unique. The fact you've managed to create that 6 times, me being one of them. You look and think, okay, well, what's driving that? That's all coming from you. You need to fix stuff within you. You know, so there's a lot of material in the last sort of 4 or 5 chapters of the first book that's all about your own personal evolution to create the changes that you need to make sure that you're not having those sort of coercive, toxic, or dysfunctional elements in your relationships, whether you stay in the relationship you're in and fix it, or whether you draw a new relationship to you that's fresh and new and no longer has a need for these dysfunctions.
So who would want to read the book?
I would suggest anybody who wants a healthy relationship should read the book. The first book was written, although it says it's my psychopathic romance, and it is about coercive, dysfunctional, gaslighting, love bombing, narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic behaviors. I have witnessed that in pretty much every relationship that I've had to deal with somebody from a coaching perspective. There has been those behavioral patterns. I'm coaching a couple at the moment, and the loveliest couple you could ever imagine, yet they have these toxic patterns within them. Yeah, and awareness is the key to be able to then communicate beyond them, to evolve beyond them.
Yeah.
And the second book is all about the dynamics of understanding what's a natural phase of a relationship and what challenges that might bring, and how you would then navigate through that period of the relationship, allowing it to grow and respectfully allowing each individual within the relationship to grow.
Awesome. And so how does someone get their hands on both of them?
They are both on Amazon. So you can do a search for My Psychopathic Romance or Healthy Lasting Love, or you could look for Colin McKay as the author.
And you have a website that if someone wanted to the books and relationships, but you also do advanced linguistic training. So anyone
there's 2 key relationships that I would suggest. One is Healthy Lasting Love, so the title of the second book. I decided I would create a website on the positive. So healthylastinglove.com will take you to that website where both books are listed, and
I will pop it in the comments here. So
the link to Amazon is there on the button and within the country that you're in. I believe you can only buy the paperback in the UK and America. I think in Australia you can only buy the Kindle edition, I think. The other website that I would direct people to is Advanced Linguistic Influencing.com. And that's where my language training. I don't do traditional NLP trainings anymore.
Advanced linguistic what? Programming?
Influencing.
Influencing.
Yeah, if you could see my whole background, the logo's there. Advanced Linguistic Influencing.
.com.
And I have taken all of the advanced language skills of NLP, practitioner, master practitioner, and all of the conversational hypnosis techniques and the additional quantum linguistic techniques that I know and train. And I've put them into a training that is a therapeutic coaching based training. But so if you think of the breakthrough process, I call it the quality coaching model for the 7 steps in the word quality. But I teach people how to use linguistics to create that change. So if you want to do a breakthrough, I teach people how to do the breakthrough linguistically. So I've taken out anchoring, collapse. There's linguistic anchoring, but that on the knuckles, swish pans. I teach people how to do those skills linguistically.
Linguistically, yeah.
So language only.
Well, you're a good friend of Connekt Coaching. You've known Kallum and I for a very, very long time. In my opinion, part of the 3-day sales training that we run called Connekt and Convert, the brand wheel was borrowed and modeled off the running with scissors exercise that we did with them. But the motivation to keep it in the training was based on your linguistics that you have. I would hear you talking to prospects on the phone and it'll be like, you sound like you've been doing this for 50 years because of the depth and the elegance of your language. And that's why we have the brand wheel in Connekt and Convert, because it just gives people the key words that they can use within the sales talk tracks, so to make them sound elegant, intelligent, and credible immediately, irrespective of what's been happening in their life. So if you're looking to improve your linguistic skills, we 100% recommend jump on Advanced Linguistic Influencing, check it out, and see if there's something there for you.
Perfect. Good.
Any last words, Cal?
No, Colin, it's always a pleasure. As I've said a million times, I'm a huge fan of NLP. I'm a geek of NLP, and what I am most in love with is seeing people like yourself, these amazing minds that adapt what we have learned and actually evolve the thinking of it to create new models, to create things that are valuable in different contexts. And it's just, I sit back on these calls with you and I'm amazed and I love
it was
having you here, so
flowing
thank you.
wonderfully well.
It was flowing really, really nicely.
Right up till that point.
I think where Cal was going with that is that the foundational skill set of NLP, and that you've managed to, with your own interest and your own personal interest and motivation, to create something on a new level that is highly sought after and is a big difference why you're getting such exceptional results with your clients. And that's what we encourage people to do: learn the foundation and then specialize. Oh, Cal, you're back. Oh no, he's gone.
Oh, he's gone. He was
Well,
there,
man,
and now he's gone.
I'm sure he will give you a big hug and a big thank you. Check out Colin. Check out the website. It's in the link. It's in the Facebook chat here. If you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to it on one of the Apple podcasts, it's going to be in the description. Links to everything. Do yourself a favor. Upgrade yourself linguistically. If you're in a relationship or you plan to be in one, read the book. It's only going to serve you to.
And I do have the YouTube channel now that is Advanced Linguistic Influencing also.
There's a YouTube channel, so we can see you. We can listen to you as we go to bed.
Training, presuppositions, meta model, Milton model, quantum linguistics.
Good. Okay. So if you are NLP trained, or you'd like to watch Colin teach traditional NLP linguistic topics, then find Colin McKay on YouTube, Advanced Linguistic Influencing on YouTube, and then there'll be a host of videos that you can consume and binge on as well.
Ever growing.
Enjoy. Thank you very much. It's about 11:30 p.m. your time in Scotland.
Yes.
We really appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, it's been great.
We'll see you soon.
Lovely to see you as always.
Thank you very much for watching the Unplugged podcast with Kallum and Conor from Connekt Coaching. Hope you loved this guest this week as much as we did. Cal?
What we wanted to remind you of is that if you wanted to steal our forever business model, which is perfect for all sorts of businesses around the world to start to build extra revenue in your business right away, get instant access by clicking on the description and going into the link below, watching the 9-minute video where we unpack everything. See you next time.